This episode practically wrote itself. Thank you for joining me. We're going to be talking about trolls and the internet, particularly trolls for YouTube content creators, but we're going to spread some information about a lot of different platforms. If you're thinking about starting a YouTube channel, which I highly encourage everyone to do, or you've got one and you're just not posting as much because you're worried about trolls. Thankfully, in the beginning, you usually don't get a lot of trolls. Once you start posting and getting a little bit of attention, they come with the territory. But remember, one of the big upsides, and we're going to go over some upsides, downsides, and how to handle trolls. But the big upside, the silver lining, is engagement. Even if someone's making a hateful comment, the algorithm is showing that as engagement and it helps your video. So even your worst critics who might say some really crazy things in the comments, that's actually helping that video be shown to other people. Same thing on all social media platforms. Now, I do have noticed that if they're particularly bad, YouTube will not show them to other people. So sometimes when I'm looking in the comments, I have to look at all comments. As a matter of fact, one of the more interesting comments that I've gotten in the last couple of days was one that I couldn't see. I was just looking at my dashboard for my videos and I thought, oh, I wasn't notified that there was a comment on this video. So I had to go to the video, show I think the latest or newest comments, and then here was this doozy. We'll talk more about that. But again, it goes back to the old phrase, there is no such thing as bad publicity. And that comes from the old newspaper days. And Oscar Wilde said, and I'm going to read this quote to make sure I get it right. Oscar Wilde said, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. Also consider the origin. There are countries out there that if you're critical to them or their government, they unleash bot farms on you. And you've probably no doubt seen that in the media. So that's a state-sponsored negative comments. And they'll review bomb you too. So what about perspective? Who is the comment really about? Who is it really aimed towards? So sometimes if it's very personal about my appearance or something, which thankfully I haven't gotten any comments like that. I can't wait until I do. But are they arguing the point? Are they just getting something off of their chest? And of course, there's this psychological phenomenon called projection. In psychology, projection is a defense mechanism where a person attributes their own unwanted thoughts, feelings, or motives to someone else. Instead of recognizing an uncomfortable impulse within themselves, they project it outward, seeing it in others. This reduces internal conflict, but often distorts the relationship and self-awareness. I'll also put up a copy of the 4 agreements that I think are really great to bear in mind. But the 4 agreements, based on a book by Don Miguel Ruiz, outlines a code of conduct based on Toltec wisdom. Number 1 is be impeccable with your word. Speak with integrity and say only what you mean. Agreement number 2, don't take anything personally. That's usually everyone's Achilles heel. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality. So there's that word again, right? Projection. Number 3, don't make assumptions. Assumptions can lead to misunderstandings and drama. That was a big one. The big one for me was number 2. The second biggest one was number 3. And I'll tell you, number 3 was a lot easier to tackle. And once I did, the communications became a lot better. And as a matter of fact, I see both 2 and 3 happening in a lot of interactions that I have with other people when problems pop up, I see those 2 at the center of it. So this is a great book for anybody to read. It's a tiny little book too. Number 4, always do your best. Your best will vary from moment to moment, but doing your best, you can avoid self-judgment and regret. Things to keep in mind when you're creating content. And as far as the don't take anything personally or don't make assumptions, sometimes I've had comments that I wasn't sure if they were negative or not. What the book teaches you, the 4 agreements, is to take these comments in the best possible light. If it could go either way, just assume it's positive. I even do that with text with family and friends, and I can't tell you how many arguments it has prevented by me just taking the most positive possible interpretation of what people write me. When I send out messages, I tell people if you see something that I text that hits your eyes the wrong way, my intent is either to inform or to entertain. And that's it. That's same purpose here on YouTube. If I can get you to laugh, that's great. Get you to smile, that's wonderful. If I can get you to think about something and inform you, prevent you from having to make a mistake that I made about something, that's great. That's my purpose. Even though I am going to show some accounts on screen, I'm not doing that to hurt anybody's feelings. This is just the reality of the situation. When people make public comments, I'm not going to show you anything that you're not going to already have access to. So you're going to get to see, although I won't show the comments because I want you to subscribe to the channel and sift through the videos and try to find out where these commenters are. It might be fun for you. If you have a little time on your hand, do that Easter egg hunt. It's also good to bear in mind that the comments are coming from people that don't know you. It's like a stranger brushing by you in a very brief commentary. It's like a leaf blowing in the wind. You're in charge of whether it's going to have an impact on you or not. Remember that, especially if somebody's a stranger. It's very hard for people that I don't know to get me worked up. It's very difficult. And we're going to talk about where that comes from and how you can adapt that to yourself. But the other thing about negativity is, especially now that I'm creating content currently every day, content is content. A bad customer service experience, that's content. A good experience, that's content. A good conversation, that's content. A troll, that's content. That's why I jokingly said this episode basically wrote itself, because I had enough material that other people had given me that this was easy to put together. And I've been wanting to do a version of this for a long time. I really wanted to shoot a video about the fallacies, the logical fallacies, and the correct way to argue, but we really just discuss one fallacy here, which we'll talk a little bit about. This particular video was inspired by two very recent trolls who I suspect might be the same person. Here are the two accounts, and this is very typical of those on YouTube that are making the negative comments. They have a very generic name. They have low or no subscribers. They have no content out there that can be judged on their own. So they're not doing any work. They're not content creators. They're just sitting there in the darkness, throwing stones. Google accounts, very generic names, a couple of digits after the name. That's probably not this person's real name. If you click on more information, there's never an email. There's never any information. You see my thumbnail is my face. I don't spend any effort trying to hide it all. I'm easy to find. I feel very comfortable making the comments I do because I'm being legitimate and real, and I'm facing the music when I make mistakes. It's interesting that every single time I've had negative comments, particularly on YouTube, always comes from these faceless Google accounts. They don't show their face. It's probably not their real name, and they're not content creators. When you're out there and putting the work in and exposing yourself to criticism, you understand what it's like getting that negativity. People with nothing to lose, it's a lot easier for them to make comments. So don't let that get to you. It reminds me of the scene in No Country for Old Men where he tells the old man at the gas station,
"You've been putting it up your whole life. You just didn't know it."
He's calling him a phony. That's what some people do. They spend a lot of time as critics and as trolls. Trolling is just negative comments. It's not constructive criticism. It's just destructive criticism. The logic is usually very poor and it's very poorly thought out. They're having an emotional reaction and they're not investing a lot of energy into it. And you shouldn't invest a lot of energy in return. And we'll talk about that too. I'm a huge supporter of the First Amendment. And we are fortunate in the United States that our speech is protected by the First Amendment. So I almost never delete a comment. I can't remember the last time I deleted someone's comment. I've never posted a video where I didn't allow comments. I encourage that. It's better for the algorithm. It's better for the channel to leave it wide open like that. Whether you engage with a negative commenter, that's really a matter of personal preference. Oftentimes I do, because the continued interaction helps the algorithm. They're not going to say anything that's going to hurt my feelings. So there's really not much downside for me. You have to decide, and it might depend on the brand. If you're doing psychological services, it might not be a good look for you to get into the gutter with a troll. But part of my message is the realities of doing business, and I like showing the negative side of it. So this is germane to the discussion and the points that I try to make. So I'll engage with the trolls. And I don't know if I could say I've ever won anybody over, but I've had a few that I was able to reach an amicable conclusion. Some of them I think just got exhausted. And when I'm busy, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. But if I have the time, I'll tickle their fancy and see what is it really at the root of the criticism, because sometimes they're willing to engage a little bit. Usually the longer the interaction, they're going to usually reveal their character. Most people reveal their character in the very first comment if it's completely off base, but sometimes continued interaction with them pretty quickly they reveal their character. So it's a historical snapshot. Anybody can go back and look at who took the high ground and who took the low ground and what's what. I do fight my urge to have the last word. I've grown out of that. It's not as important to me anymore. I found out that if you want to really irritate somebody, because it happened to me and it irritated me years ago when I was a lot more sensitive, every now and then I'll drop that in there on somebody. Especially if somebody makes a really, there have been times I've made really logical counter arguments, cited sources, put a lot of energy into a comment, and then they just reply, cool. I laugh now, but that used to really get me. So I don't write these really long logical responses because, again, people are having an emotional reaction. You can't use logic to change an emotional person's mind, and you also can't use emotion to change a logical person's mind. If their comment has some logic in it, there's a chance I could reach them. I don't really care so much about winning them over, but if there is a fundamental misunderstanding, and I believe that it's legitimate misunderstanding, there's a lot of people that love to intentionally misunderstand your words and twist them, and they're trying to create conflict. And the more experience you have, you can quickly deduce which of those camps they're in and how do you need to respond to each person. If someone, and this happened with my most popular LinkedIn post, I had one just go thermonuclear, I mean viral as far as my small world is concerned. And generally, the comments were very positive. Sadly, it wasn't the best thing I'd ever written on LinkedIn. I was a little sad that was the thing that got the attention. But I understand, looking back, I've analyzed why that particular post hit and so many people were interested. It hit a pop culture topic, which was the movie Tron Ares, and I talked about AI. And I made this ham-fisted analogy that what wasn't very good, and one guy called me out on it. And so I explained. I said, "This is not my best writing," and I deferred to him in that. And I thought that would be fine, but he shot back with a more accusatory tone and said some things. And so then I explained, which is unusual for me, but then I kind of explained my rationale there. I kept extending the olive branch to him. And I think at the end, he just got exhausted and he did thumbs up on the last thing that I said. I wasn't trying to win the debate. I really felt he didn't understand what I was trying to say. And I did admit that there were flaws in the way that I expressed that point. So I thought he could be reached. But then I said, I'll follow you on LinkedIn as well. That way I can stay in touch with your insights and things like that. He didn't follow back. But by following him, I was able to see the pattern of his comments. And again, I didn't spend a lot of energy into this. It just pops up in my feed. Now, this guy has probably posted 5 times in the last 5 years. So just like the Google accounts on YouTube, right? Now, even though he uses his face, and that's probably his real name, he sits there. He doesn't create his own content. He doesn't put himself out there for criticism. But he does sit back, not completely in the shadows, but he does sit back. Somebody might spend hours writing this LinkedIn post. And LinkedIn posts, some of them are very intense because they're facts and links, and they're posting articles that took them hours to research to write. And here's this guy, and he just drops in criticism. Honestly, I've probably seen him interact 8 because he's very active on other people's pages. He's not active on his page. And that's very telling. Again, it goes back to what you see on YouTube. Because sometimes I see criticism and I'm having to decide to myself, is this legitimate? Maybe I should think about this. Maybe I should change this or that. You have to be careful with that. So I analyze, where is it coming from? You always look at the source, or I do anyway. And I want to know, and I'm trying to understand because I do make missteps and I make mistakes, and I'm open to admitting that very obviously. But in this case, he just takes pot shots at other people. I think I've seen at least 8 comments he's made on other pages. None of them are positive. None of them. He's not trying to lift anybody up. And me, I have to admit, I've said some horrible things. Not about people, about the creator themselves, but sometimes the point that they're trying to make, I make a very strong disagreement with the point. I don't go after the people. That's very weak. That type of argument's called the ad hominem, where you attack the person versus the point. But I've said some ugly things. But I'll tell you, I make 100 positive and supportive comments for every one nasty one, at least. Whereas this guy, it's 100% blast. He's not helping anybody. He's not, doesn't look like he's subscribing or supporting people. He logs in every day and he wants to tear people down. That seems to be how he gets his kicks, which is very unfortunate. But if he ever puts himself out there, launches a channel, starts posting a lot of comment, I think his behavior would change. But we'll see. People might not be able to be reached. Let's look at the ad hominem. I'm going to post on screen what it's about. Ad hominem is a logical fallacy where someone attacks the person making the argument instead of addressing the argument itself. They go after the messenger. Believe it or not, name calling begins around age 6. Unfortunately, we have college educated people that haven't gravitated past that. When I see an ad hominem, an attack on me, not my message, but an attack on me personally, in the very first comment, I already know I'm dealing with somebody that's got primary school level logic. They're having an extremely childish emotional response. Keep that in mind. You're dealing with a child. In that instance, they might be fully functional in the rest of their life, but something you said just brought that inner child out. Usually, if it doesn't come out in the first interaction, usually by the second or third message, they're going to jump to the ad hominem because they don't have the, and I mean this very sincerely, they do not have the intellectual firepower or the concern or the caring, but usually it's they don't have the intellectual firepower to sit there and go toe to toe and have a logical argument about the point behind the post or the video. They have a feeling and they want to express it and they don't want to engage. And I'll tell you that debate, I've not seen too many people change their outlook on things from a debate. Now I will, but I'm wired very differently because I like to know what does the data support, what's real and what's not real. I'm careful about using the word truth because that word has almost seemed to have lost its meaning. So I tend to gravitate more towards what does the data support and what does it not support. My mind absolutely can be changed about things. There aren't many things that I'm not willing to take a look at. And people seem to be so certain of themselves, and I'm not. Like I said, I don't think there's anything that with enough evidence that I wouldn't change my mind about. And I'm very comfortable with that because that's more of a scientific way of thinking. Whereas a lot of other people's thinking is very inflexible. They might think one sports team is the greatest of all, and you can't convince them otherwise, nor should you try. A particular political party above all others, and everybody else sucks. One aspect of one religion, flavor of one religion, and everybody else is going to hell. That's intellectually lazy. It's very easy, and that's why so many people engage in it. It doesn't take much effort. I wear this color. I fly this flag. And then your brain can just turn off at that point because anything that doesn't match that messaging, you can just instantly reject it. Now, unfortunately, these people don't have very good lives and stuff's falling out of the sky all the time and they don't know why. This is a video for another time, but I will tease it here because I'm going to talk about it later. If your worldview, if your assumptions about the world and the way that you think about the world, if you have a good worldview, you shouldn't be surprised by very much. And tragedy shouldn't be visiting your life very often. And when it does, it's completely out of left field. It goes to the borderlands of my channel. I like to talk more about psychology and business, and this is way in the psychology part of it. But if your worldview is strong, you shouldn't be surprised very much and you shouldn't be upset very much because you have a good understanding of why the world is the way it is and the fact that we can't have very much influence on what's going on. I want to be a positive force, but I'm a human being. I have a temper. I get frustrated. And we'll talk more about the people that try too hard to suppress that and to be too perfect and what happens with that. When my primary job was investigating insurance fraud, I used to work with a brilliant attorney. This guy was amazing. And he had been mentored by some legendary attorneys where he's from. And he used to repeat this phrase that's very popular among trial lawyers. He said, and I'm going to look at it to make sure I'm saying it right. He says, if you have the facts, pound the facts. If you don't have the facts, pound the table. We were in this case where we were working on a party that we had evidence that this party had committed insurance fraud. And we had done an examination under oath, an EUO. The other party got very emotional. and their attorney got emotional. He was explaining to me, you're in the best position when the facts are on your side. So again, facts, that's another funny word that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I like to say data. Does the data support it or does the data not support it? If you have the facts on your side, you're going to pound the facts. And the other party, they didn't have the facts on their side, so they just pounded the table. That's why I don't invest a lot of energy into listening to someone who's being emotionally passionate about something. I want to know not only the data, I also want to know, well, what do we do with this? How can we fix this? And problems that we can't fix or influence, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, really. If I don't have any influence, it's a waste of time. And that goes into the circle of influence versus the circle of control that I talk about in my private life at least once a week. And I think for me, it's been the greatest mental calibration tool for me. Another thing that you're seeing too is an economic phenomenon, creating an army of trolls. So during that national health crisis back in 2020, it caused a lot of people to end up either working from home, also causing a lot of people to be unemployed. There was a lot more social media consumption. It was the golden era for podcasters. There were people, talking to an iPhone in the corner of their garage that became millionaires. And I mean, and good for them. They got attention and they won the internet. So that's great. But also in that rise in viewership, there were a rise in trolls, and the comments were venomous. And everybody's sitting at home. Everybody's frustrated. They got family members sick and dying. It was a bad deal. So you've got a lot of people that were working that aren't working now, and they're sitting at home, just like during the health crisis. And they're upset. They've lost their jobs. And they hate their life. They may hate themselves. And unfortunately, the only kick they can get is by trying to take somebody down on the internet with some snide comment about their appearance or some aspect of what they said. I don't have very much sympathy for these people because that's not a healthy way to express yourself. And again, the times that I've made comments like that, I'm not very proud of it. There are a couple of things that set me off, and I have a very low ability of self-control on only a very small handful of topics. And I tend to be very emotional about those topics, although there is some logic behind it as well. And I'm not excusing that behavior. I'm just explaining it. So, and I think when I'm honest about that on camera too, I'm less likely to engage in those type of behaviors. I think that people should practice rigorous honesty. A lot of bad things would go away if we were just upfront about our habits and intentions. Next, don't confuse legitimate constructive criticism with trolling. I don't get very much constructive criticism. I do get criticism. It's usually not very constructive. And the worst stuff that I see is usually YouTube comments. I would say it's up there. Facebook and YouTube are the worst. LinkedIn, I'm not an elitist, but LinkedIn, most of those people have a job and they're educated, or they're educated and they're at least looking for a job. People aren't as nasty on there because if you look at the education level and the economic level where these people are on LinkedIn, they're cut above these other platforms. Now, I'm not saying they're better. I'm just saying it's a different cut of a different cloth is what I'm saying. I'm spending more time on LinkedIn. Plus, my whole thing is business, and LinkedIn is about business. And I think one of the reasons why I don't get a lot of constructive criticism, particularly on YouTube, is most people aren't creators on there. So there's that level of anonymity, and there's no accountability. There's anonymity. And I'm a big fan of privacy, but I don't like anonymity. And that's a much bigger thing to unbox for another video. I fully support people's privacy, but anonymity, I don't know. I don't know if people should have that because people behave differently when people know who they are and they know that they're in the public eye. So I've had a few people say horrible things to me, and I felt like the facts were on my side in particular topics. I invited them on this channel to go live with no prep, and let's just talk it out. Let's talk out our logic and our reasoning. Nobody has taken me up on that offer. Mainly, they don't want their face out there. And two, they may even know that the facts aren't on their side, or they can admit to themselves, not to me, that they really don't know that much about that topic. I don't tend to debate about topics that I don't know quite a bit about. I keep my mouth shut the rest of the time. There are a lot of things I don't know anything about, and I just don't engage on those topics. Or I try to, or if I do start to talk about it, I give that caveat that, hey, I said it to somebody yesterday on a telephone conversation. We were having this great dialogue, and then they asked me about something. I said, let me tell you up front, that's not something I know a whole lot about, but let me tell you what I know, and then I'll try to get you to a person that I think knows a lot more. So I think it's really painful when people speak outside of their expertise. If you're going to have a platform, use it. You can speculate, you can ask questions, you can talk about things. If you stay in your lane, you'll do a lot better. And that way, when you do have the critics, you're speaking from your expertise. You're not just throwing stuff out there. And there's been a number of content creators and big internet personalities recently have mental health crisis. I think two of them had long-term hospitalizations. Hard to speculate on everything involved, but I do know at least one of those people have a very strong persona. So in other words, the person on camera is quite different from who they are. So they go and they play a character. That's normal if you're in a band. I think it's a little strange when you're on YouTube. Now, if you're an actor and you're a comedian, you're on stage, you're doing a role. But if you're doing business content or you were, a psychologist, you're in the hard sciences and you're playing a role, that's tough. That's really tough. It's tough on your mind because all the love and the attention and even the criticism is aimed towards an avatar that is not you. So for me, I find it a lot easier just to be myself because I don't have to worry about getting confused or getting lost in that character that I'm playing. And we've seen, and I'm not going to name any names, but we've seen some podcasters blow up, go over the edge, say all kinds of crazy things and lose their audience. And I think that's when they get lost in the character or the caricature of themselves. So a caricature is maybe just a magnified version of themselves, and a character might be somebody vastly different than who you are. It's a lot easier to be yourself. And we're moving into a phase of YouTube. All the experts that I'm following currently say that authenticity is coming back in. It might be time to drop the virtual background. I'm always going to wear some kind of decent looking shirt because that's who I am, and this is business content, and I'm from a generation where I feel I should have a tie and a coat on, like Dan Pena. Look like that guy all the time. I realize that the suit and tie association with businesses is out. It's behind the times to be that way. But as a professional, I do prefer the collared shirt. It fits with the content. Is it a costume? I don't think so, because I'll dress up like this and although this is not fancy, but even to go do a relatively mundane task, I'll put a nice shirt on because I'm an ambassador for my business, for my brand as an author and the other services that I offer. What else about the trolls in the comments? It can be flattering. Isn't it nice to know that somebody's thinking about you, that somebody's at least watched your content? A lot of times the comments are just, they look at your title, they watch the first 30 seconds, and then they write a nasty comment. But it's funny to me if you're living rent-free in someone else's head and that they got so enraged at something they probably don't understand in the video that they didn't even watch all the way to the end. It's the equivalent of somebody leaving a bad review for a restaurant that they've never eaten at. They're not a subscriber. They're not a follower. They've never bought a book from me, and they probably never will. But they're going to leave this comment. That is a real revelation of character for that person. And I know people that get really bent out of shape about the comments that they get. But at the end of the day, you've got to realize this person is complaining about a hamburger they've never eaten. They have no skin in the game. They haven't contributed any money. YouTube videos are free. Online content on social media is free. This person is complaining about something that they didn't fully watch, something they didn't fully understand that was handed to them for free. If you've made it this far, congratulations. You might be on the way to something really new. Turn that camera on, put yourself up there, see how people respond to you. I might put out a video and think, man, this has got a lot of value. I hope people really tune into it, and it gets no views. And then my highest performing short, I think, is called Trolling for Views. That's the headline.
Next day, I put up the same video with the picture, I quit. This is my last YouTube video. Instantly, 50, 60 people watching, normally 10, 15 people. Everybody's watching. Oh, he's going to quit. Just shows you the power of clickbait. And it's too bad I can't have April Fools every week because I would have so much fun with it. Just putting up stuff that's not true.
Guitarist Robin Spinell talking about, because he's got a huge YouTube channel. He was one of our first big guests that had a giant reach. And he's a well-known musician, especially up in Canada. His main thing is he plays guitar and he likes to play guitar for money. I've had him do some custom songs for people for special events. And he'll do sometimes long form jams and he'll take tips on YouTube. He's encouraging people to sign up with Patreon. But how he gets his audience is a lot of clickbait type material. And then he also was complaining about the relative fickle nature of his audience. They're fickle because how he came about them. When he has the same issue, that's why his channel is gigantic. I would much rather have 1,000 mutually loyal, in other words, I'm helping them and they're helping me, than 100,000 people that just come to the channel and get that quick hit of dopamine and then they're off to the next dopamine fix. I don't want to be that guy. I want to develop very deep relationships with the subscribers to the channel. And I've got a few. I'd say every 2 months I get one person who we become mutual allies. I support what they're doing. They support and it's fantastic. You've got to put yourself out there and put yourself out there a lot, figure out what works and what doesn't. And I've seen people turn negative, back to the haters, back to the trolls. I've seen people turn negative comments, negative feedback, negative reviews into commercials. We're talking about Gary Vee. He comes up almost every episode because he talks about constantly putting information up and then taking what people really latch onto and then turning it into an ad because you already know it gets attention, negative or positive. Some people have taken a negative, even restaurants have taken their absolute worst review and somehow worked it into their advertising, which I think it's funny. It's brilliant. It shows a level of humility. It's not, negativity is not just content. It can also be ad content as well. Speaking of friends, I should use air quotes when I say that. And this is particularly bad on Facebook because these are people that are, people's Facebook tends to be people they know, right? Family and friends. In the heyday of Facebook, it was a free-for-all. But Facebook is an older technology. So the people now that you're connected with on there are usually, they know you've met them face to face. The phenomenon that's the strangest, and it's the worst on Facebook, I think. You can put in the comments if you disagree. But you'll have a friend, maybe somebody you went to high school with, somebody you've known for years. They don't click like on anything. They don't comment on anything. Months and maybe even years go by. And then you say that one thing they don't like. And then they crawl out of that dirty gutter to make a comment, debating, snide comment, saying something against that one comment. I don't have those people anymore in my life. Once they do that, if they haven't interacted in any other way, that's not the kind of person I want. I want people that are, there doesn't have to be 100% reciprocity. So if I click like on your stuff, I don't expect anything in return. If we're friends, I don't expect you to do anything. But if I'm supportive of you and I never hear anything from you and then you pop up to say something negative, you got to go. I know where the ban button is. I know where the delete, the unfriend, and I'm very quick to use it. My priority is I don't want lukewarm friends. I want good friends where we care about each other's personal and business success and we're actively involved in it. And I don't have time for those other people. They come in out of nowhere and they just try to deflate your balloon. Those aren't real friends. It's okay to let those people go. Really, if they have your phone number, they don't need your Facebook. You can zap them off there. I'm not telling you to disown family members and think, not at all. No, I'm just saying if you're doing business online and they're taking you down and you're trying to get your business going and you're trying to get some positive attention, zap them. You got to get them off that platform. You can explain why you're doing it or beforehand, but yeah, get rid of them. I think you'd be a lot happier. And I explained in a LinkedIn post, somebody was struggling with some friends and this person's making a lot of positive change and activity in their life. And they've just recently become a podcaster. And I told them, I said, you know, those hot air balloons, they have all those sandbags around the outside. And if a hot air balloon wants to rise higher in the sky, they have to cut those sandbags loose. So you got to drop that weight. And what happens when we get these rockets out of the atmosphere? They have to lose those stages. They have to lose those tanks. You have to leave something behind. And for your success, for you to rise higher, you're going to have to leave some people behind, especially if they're sandbagging you. If they're holding you down, just let them go. They may come around, they may not. It doesn't matter. There are people that you're so worried about their opinion right now that I promise you, you won't even be talking to 5 years from now. You might not even remember their name 10 years from now. That you're going to say, now, what was that person that? And somebody that you're really hung up on what they're thinking right now. What they think is so important to you. They'll be gone. They'll vanish with the comments, particularly on YouTube where you have relatively anonymous people commenting. Some people are having real mental health episodes. I've seen some comments where I don't know if they're seeing the same thing everyone else is seeing. In other words, paranoid schizophrenia. I've seen some I'm not a doctor, but I've seen the signs in some comments. Those people are usually the few that I won't respond to anything to. I might give them a thumbs up just because I don't want to discourage them if they're in a fragile state. I don't try to score points or write anything funny or sarcastic, or if they're struggling with something and it seems pretty obvious, I leave that alone because I don't possess the skill set to navigate that. I'm not a healthcare professional. Use your best judgment when it comes to that. You know how to keep yourself safe. You also have to think about the scale of the effort that goes in. So this video will probably take about 4 hours from the pre-planning to the script writing, the shooting and the editing, and then getting it through vidIQ, getting it posted on to YouTube, getting it scheduled for the right time. Let's just say it's about 4 hours investment. And then somebody might, who knows, we'll see, might take 10 seconds of effort to take a pot shot at the video without even watching it. So you have to think about the size difference between those two. It's almost like the difference between the size of a tick and the size of a dog, and the content creator is the dog. So bear in mind, the tick requires the dog. The dog doesn't need the tick. Before you go, remember this. A dog can live without ticks. Ticks can't live without the dog. Press on.